Shabbat Shalom to everyone. We are celebrating the life of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This evening, and our service will have a little bit of a different format. Throughout the service, we will be reading excerpts from one particular sermon, and then shortly before the Shema, we will read another excerpt from a different sermon that he gave. I hope that you'll find these readings or these sermons, excerpts, to be meaningful and capture in some way part of the essence of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. We're going to begin our service with the candle lighting, and we call on Gil and Enid Layden to lead us in that prayer. Page 120.
Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who powers us with mitzvahs, commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu
An excerpt from his final address at the Bishop Charles J. Mason Temple in Memphis, April 3rd, 1968, shortly before he was assassinated. Each of you, in some way, is building some kind of temple. The struggle is always there. It gets discouraging sometimes. It gets very disenchanting sometimes. Some of us are trying to build a temple of peace. We speak out against war, we protest, but it seems that your head is going against a concrete wall. It means nothing. And so you often, as you set out to build the temple of peace, you are left lonesome. You are left discouraged, you are left bewildered. Well, that is the story of life. And the thing that makes me happy is that I can hear a voice crying through the vista of time saying, quote, "It may not come today, or it may not come tomorrow, but it is well that it is within thine heart. It's well that you are trying," close quote. You may not see it. The dream may not be fulfilled. But it's just good that you have a desire to bring it into reality. It's well that it's in thine heart. We continue to welcome the Shabbat with Eila Chamda Libi, page 129.
God is my heart's desire. Appear, do not hide. Hosanna ve'ana titalam, Hosanna ve'ana titalam. Eli hamdali bi, Eli
And we continue now with the Lachadodi, Come My Beloved to Greet Thee Shabbat, page 138 and page 139, the first two verses. We will chant and then we'll go to the final verse on page 139, verse 9. And at that time we will rise and we will greet the spirit of Shabbat. Lachadodi.
Likrat Shabbat lichuvanelcha, ki bekor habracha, mirosh mikedem nisucha, sof maase b'machshevatikra. Lecha dodi, lecha dodi likrat kala, v'ni Shabbat nekavila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, v'ni Shabbat nekavila. Boi v'shalom ateret bala, gam b'simcha ובצהלה, תוך אמונם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבילה.
You may be seated. On page 140, the Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat, a song for the Shabbat. The righteous bloom like a date palm, they thrive like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of Adonai, they flourish in the courts of our God. In old age, they still produce fruit. They are full of sap and freshness, attesting that Adonai is upright, my rock in whom there is no wrong. Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat, page 140.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולצמא לשמך עליון, ולצמא לשמך עליון. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולצמא לשמך עליון, ולצמא לשמך להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך באלות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי הגיון בחימור. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולצמא לשמך עליון, ולצמא לשמך עליון. כי שמתתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך רנן. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולצמא לשמך עליון, ולצמא לשמך עליון, לשמך עליון.
And let us rise for the Baruch Hu, the call to worship, page 146. The Baruch Hu. You may be seated. And let us join in prayer, the middle of page 150. One of the prayers of the prelude to Shema, and thereafter we will have another reading of an excerpt from a sermon at Ebenezer Church on November 5th of 1967. It relates very much to the Shema and the history of our people and what this prayer brings to us. Page 150. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel, together, by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. And so I say to you this morning that if you have never found something so clear and so precious to you that you will die for it, then you aren't fit to live. You may be 38 years old, as I happen to be, and one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls upon you to stand up for some great principle, some great issue, some great cause. And you refuse to do it because you are afraid. You refuse to do it because you want to live longer. You're afraid that you will lose your job, or you are afraid that you will be criticized, or that you will lose your popularity, or you're afraid that somebody will stab you, or shoot at you, or bomb your house. So you refuse to take the stand. Well, you may go on and live until you are 90, but you are just as dead at 38 as you would be at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your life is but the belated announcement of an earlier death of the spirit. You died when you refused to stand up for right. You died when you refused to stand up for truth. You died when you refused to stand up for justice. Don't ever think that you're by yourself. Go on to jail if necessary, but you never go alone. Take a stand for that which is right, and the world may misunderstand you and criticize you, but you never go alone. For somewhere I read that one with God is a majority. And God has a way of transforming a minority into a majority. Walk with him this morning and believe in him and do what is right, and he'll be with you even until the consummation of the ages. Yes, I've seen the lightning flash. I've heard the thunder roll. I felt sin breakers dashing, trying to conquer my soul. But I heard the voice of God saying, still to fight on. He promised never to leave me alone, never to leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. Please rise for the Shema, page 152.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Leolam Amen.
Be seated. We continue now with the V'ahavta, and you shall love the Lord your God.
Love Adonai your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. And these words which I command you on this day unto your children. Speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise, when you rise.
The Micha on page 158 is taken from the Shirah, the Song of Moses that they sang at the Red Sea as they were crossing. After they finished crossing the Red Sea, they sang this song unto God. And it is referenced in, again, his last sermon that he gave shortly before his untimely death. So he continues, and you know, if I were standing at the beginning of time, with the possibility of taking a kind of general and panoramic view of the whole human history up to now, and the Almighty said to me, Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in? I would take my mental flight by Egypt, and I would watch God's children in their magnificent trek from the dark dungeons of Egypt across the Red Sea, through the wilderness on toward the promised land. And in spite of its magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. The Reverend Dr. King continues to want to see the panoramic of history up to his time, how much he wishes to live a few years in the second half of the 20th century, and if permitted to live that long, then, quote, I will be happy. He now sermonizes on the meaning of this panorama of history. Now, what does all this mean in this great period of history? It means that we've got to stay together. We've got to stay together and maintain unity. You know, whenever Pharaoh wanted to prolong the period of slavery in Egypt, he had a formula for doing it. What was that? He kept the slaves fighting amongst themselves. But whenever the slaves get together, something happens in Pharaoh's court, and he cannot hold the slaves in slavery. When the slaves get together, that's the beginning of getting out of slavery. Now let us maintain unity. We continue now with the Micha Mocha on page 158, the song at the Red Sea.
We are walking in the light of God. 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 We are walking, we are walking, we are walking in the light of God. We are walking, we are walking, we are walking in the light of God. 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 We are walking, we are walking, we are walking in the light of God. We are walking, we are walking, we are walking in the light of God. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nehidar ba'kodesh. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nehidar ba'kodesh. Bora tehilot osei felei. Bora tehilot osei felei.
And we continue with the Vishamru on page 162. We continue now with this beautiful sermon that the Reverend Dr. King composed and gave again the day before his death. This section of his sermon I like to title, quote, "I'm so happy that I didn't sneeze." You know, several years ago, I was in New York City autographing the first book that I had written. And while sitting there autographing books, a demented Black woman came up to see me. The only question I heard from her was, "Are you Martin Luther King?" I was looking down writing and I said, "Yes." And the next minute I felt something beating on my chest. Before I knew it, I had been stabbed by this demented woman. I was rushed to Harlem Hospital. It was a dark Saturday afternoon. And that blade had gone through, and the x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of my aorta, the main artery. It came out in the New York Times the next morning that if I had merely sneezed, I would have died. After a few days, they allowed me to read some letters from all over the states and the world. I had received one from the president and the vice president. I've forgotten what those telegrams said. I received a visit and a letter from the governor of New York, but I've forgotten what the letter said. But there was another letter that came from a little girl, a young girl who was a student at the White Plains High School. And I looked at the letter and I'll never forget it. It said simply, "Dear Dr. King, I am a 9th grader at the White Plains High School." She said, "While it should not matter, I would like to mention that I'm a white girl. I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering, and I read that if you had sneezed, you would have died. And I'm simply writing to you to say that I'm so happy that you didn't sneeze. I want to say that I too am happy that I didn't sneeze, because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960 when students all over the South started sitting in the lunch counters. And I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best of the American dream and taking the whole back to those great walls of democracy which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. If I had sneezed, I would not have been here in 1963 when the Black people of Birmingham, Alabama aroused the conscience of this nation and brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have had a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I'd had. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been down in Selma, Alabama to see the great movement there. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been in Memphis to see a community rally around those brothers and sisters who are suffering. I'm so happy that I didn't sneeze. Please rise for the Amidah. Adonai Sifatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha, page 164, and we'll continue through page 168. Page 166. And we continue in silent meditation, page 170, page 172 through page 180, or in your own silent devotions. You may either remain standing, or of course, you may be seated.
May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer, my rock and my
I'd called James to speak to us tonight. He is in the best position to really tell us the impact of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King upon our country, upon the lives of so many that he touched and made so much better. So I'd like to call on James now to come forward and to share his reflections with us. Jim?
First, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to give my impressions in the life that I grew up with Dr. Martin Luther King. First, I want to say that I was born in Union, Mississippi. It's a little small village town, 18 miles south of Philadelphia, Mississippi. And Philadelphia, Mississippi is the place that we found the 3 civil rights workers that was murdered, 18 miles from my mother's house. Growing up there as a kid, I had no idea that there was that much animosity in people's hearts for our people. But then following Dr. Martin Luther King over the years, I always wondered who inspired him? Who gave him the lift that he needed to continue his fight into civil rights? And I always say it was Jackie Robinson. And I was impressed. I said, Jackie Robinson? And growing up as a kid, we all loved Jackie Robinson because he was, in 1947, he broke the color line in baseball. What's most impressive about Jackie Robinson, he was by himself. With Dr. King, there was always a multitude of people around him, aiding him, getting him involved. But I started with Dr. King when I was 19 years old, because I just got out of the Air Force. And it was hard to believe that while I was in the Air Force, I really couldn't get involved with the civil rights movement. So I came back home. I had a choice of getting an early discharge, so I taking an early discharge and came back home. And we started to get involved with civil rights and the kids coming down in 1960 during the voter registration drives and getting everyone involved. And we marched and we sang, we did things that trying to get people involved to vote. It's amazing how many people who actually were afraid. We beat on doors and get people to try to vote. They would say, oh no, get away, I know. And then I understood why. I didn't realize that there were groups of people in the state of Mississippi that was controlling your thoughts or trying to. The White Citizen Council, the Ku Klux Klan, the Sovereign Commission. These people had individuals all throughout the state that was monitoring Black people, trying to find exactly what they were doing. So During this era of time, we started the Freedom Democratic Party under the Dr. Martin Luther King with Fannie Lou Hamer, Medgar Evers, other people in the state, young people. In the 1960s, all the kids came down with the civil rights movement, sit-ins, march-ins, everything. We did it all. And we tried to do as much as possible to get people involved and to vote. At times there was a problem because people were afraid. But we did what we have to do. And even when Dr. King came along with his boycott in Montgomery, 1955, we all was involved with, people was involved with that. Later on, when he got involved with the voter registration drive and other things he was involved with, we followed him. Everyone followed him. Even when he was at his lowest point, we still followed him. There was a time when we thought that what's going to happen? But he kept giving us faith, continues to believe that we will be able to reach the promised land, he always said. I have a dream. And his dream, it stimulated a whole lot of it. It encouraged all of us to get up behind him and continue to march and fight and do what we have to do to make sure that we got the right to vote. And we did that with Dr. King. I mean, he was I never met the man personally, but I always followed him, through the media, through his books, and his attitude about his people. It's amazing that we have forgotten all of this. It's been 60 years. I sit down and think about, in 1960, I was 21 years old. Because of Dr. King, I went down and registered to vote. At this time, it wasn't a big hassle in Morrisville, Mississippi, to register to vote. We didn't get the hassle until after the civil rights workers came down in 1961, 62, and get involved with trying to get other people registered to vote, when it became a problem. That's when we were harassed by individuals at the polling places to keep us from voting, or trying to register to vote. But that was part of the system. I still think right now, what would Dr. King say about his dream? It's amazing that how far we've gone backwards in the last 60 years. When it comes down to civil rights, voter registration, voter rights, all other rights that we thought we had accomplished. We had made the dream that this is going to be a melting pot of the world, for the world to see how great we were going to be. We still had the opportunity to do that. But right now, we have made some steps backwards. And we're going to have to do something to change this. But what can we do? I'm sure right now that Dr. King would say, this nightmare, they're taking over the United States. And this is a nightmare. Instead of being the United States, we are the blue and red states. That's a problem, a major problem. The blue and red states instead of the United States. I grew up thinking about the United States of America, not a blue and red America. Does anyone realize where the idea of a red America came from? Did you ever read the Little Red Book of Mao Zedong? That's the idea what I get about the Little Red Book. I think about the red states. They're trying to take away the rights of individuals. Why? Is it fear? I think so. It is fear. But we still are a melting pot. The only way we are going to survive is united. It's got to be a United States of America, not red and green America. And to this day, I don't understand how that we can become so separate in 60 years. I'm sure that Dr. King right now and other individuals who was involved with the movement don't believe that this could have happened, that we have slipped this far backwards in 60 years instead of going forward. It's amazing to me that what we've become. Sometimes I think that years ago, there was another group of people. Now, that was in an area that they were sorted out as individuals helping the country, They came in small groups, they multiplied, they multiplied, they multiplied, they involved the country, they developed the country. Then they changed the administration, the government. A new pharaoh came in. He said, these people are getting too powerful, they're getting stronger, they're multiplying like weeds. Something has to be done. So what did he do? He put these people in slavery to control them. Now, think today, I mean, you think about this today, that there are individuals right now that who are thinking the same way, that are doing the same thing. The people who are coming to this country now, that in the past who helped develop this country over the years, who have worked their fingers to the bone to inspire this country. They are the ones who have been, we don't need you anymore. Well, you know, this is part of that thing of the red state. We don't need these people anymore because they're multiplying. They're going to take over our country. It's a myth. So I have something. One thing I want to say to read is this: the words. It's our biggest problem right now. The words that people speak in this country. Media is great. Social media is outstanding, but it's been misused. The words that we speak today are very, you know, that was the kid that said, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's a fable, because words do hurt. That's our problem right now. Words are destroying us. We're destroyed by the words that people speak. Rabbi Gamble told one of his wise servants to go to the market, bring me something good. The servant brought back a tongue. The rabbi said, good. Now go and bring me something bad. Again, the servant returned with a tongue. The rabbi was puzzled. He said, why is this? He said, Rabbi, the tongue may be a source of either good or evil. It is good, there's nothing better. When it's bad, there's nothing worse. And that is our problem today, that the tongue is controlling the system, our people. We're letting people get up with their rhetoric, their tongue, making us red and blue states. Hopefully the Dr. King and the people are going to realize that we're not going to let this happen. We're going to have to get out there and say, look, we're not going to be a red and blue state. We're going to be the United States. This is what, there's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about a red and blue state. It says the United States of America. And hopefully this is what we will get back to. I mean, to maintain the legacy of Dr. King and the other people that died in the 60s. There were 6 major people that died in the 60s. John F. Kennedy, Dr. Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, the 3 civil rights workers, were martyrs of the 60s. Although people talk about Lyndon Johnson, I think Lyndon Johnson is probably one of the greatest presidents in our era, because he did something that nobody would. He defied the system. He signed the civil rights legislation and voter rights legislation. Although he knew that it was the right thing to do. He didn't quiver. He put the United States above everything else. But are we going to find anybody today that's going to put the United States first? Are we? Right now, tomorrow, I mean, this weekend and Tuesday, we're going to start voting again on another thing about voters' rights. Now, it's been 60 years we've had our rights to vote, and all of a sudden now, we're going to take them away. It's hard to believe that this is 2022 that we are talking about voters' rights again. It's impossible for me to believe that. For 60 years, I've been out there on the battlefield, working, dealing with individuals, trying to get the word across that all men are created equal. You know, and hopefully that we get that into people's minds. Right now, we are a lost as I was, Luther would say, a lost ball in high weeds when it comes down to dealing with individuals and people. We're going to have to do something to bring America back to its greatest point. And we can't do that by being red and blue states. Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
Thank you, James, for that beautiful, beautiful talk, and hope that we're all motivated to go out and protect what America is to be about, as you have so articulated it so beautifully here at our services this evening. Again, thank you.
When Rabbi suggested a certain song for a meditation after James spoke, I deep dived and did a little research into it. Like James, they're an unusual sort, but Bono and his Irish band U2 was over touring, and they were in Chicago. And while in Chicago, the band researched and was educated in the civil rights movement over here. And it just struck such a chord with him that he was moved and motivated to write two pieces, actually, I looked up. Two which some would argue are his most famous popular pieces. In the Name of Love, which I'm sure at least you've heard on the radio, and a song simply called MLK. Neither of these pieces actually reference Martin Luther King, but they are both inspired by him. He wrote the MLK as an elegy for his life. And he wrote that when he was learning about the civil rights movement and about Martin Luther King, that he was brought back to scripture, actually, he wrote, in the story of Cain and how there was bleeding from the ground. And he said that it made him think of Dr. King, but he realized that he wouldn't be bleeding and coming back for retaliation, but for understanding. And so he wrote a very simple piece, MLK, which he actually was his most performed song on tour. He tended to dim the lights. I can't run fast enough to dim ours, but he ended most of his tour concerts with this song, lights dimmed by candlelight, and people would sing along. Sleep, sleep tonight, and may your dreams be realized. If the thundercloud passes rain, so let it rain, rain down on him. it rain, let it rain on him.
We continue now with the Kiddush and Motzi. And that may be found on page 123. Please rise.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher kiddushanu Zikaron lemasei v'reishit, ki olam techilah, lemikraye kodesh, zecher litziat Kivanu v'charta
Should I?
And join together in the Motzi. You may be seated. Our service continues now with the prayer for healing, the Mishaberach prayer on page 371.
May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
This week we pray for the special healing of Rhoda Bennett, Paul Bradley, Harold H. Fink, Charmaine Mosier, Bruce Mosier, Mark Schoenfeld, Mark Siegel, Glory Weisberg, Valerie Simmerman, Julie Stein, David Cherniak, Harry Appleman, Sandy Self, Phyllis Feibelman, Dr. John Johnson, Mark and Hetty Blinderman. We'll now ask the people in our congregation to recite the names of anyone in need of healing. Thank you. Now ask the people on Zoom to unmute yourselves and again recite the names of those in need of healing.
Barb McGinnis, Mark Carroll.
My wife Patricia, and my sister-in-law Carmen.
Walter Kirkland and Eli Evans.
Susan Baker,
Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Before we proceed to our closing service with the Aleinu and recitation of Kaddish and the closing song. We have a little presentation to make. Larry Miller has given so much of his time and energy to beautifying our grounds. Last week, he shared the fruits of that labor by bringing tangerines and all kinds of different fruit that came from the plantings in the back. I know that he works diligently, and a member of our congregation, who happens to be my wife, wanted to say thank you to Larry. And when she showed me the gift, I said, well, we really need to do this in front of the congregation. He nudges me constantly, for good reason, to continue to work and to beautify our grounds, to plant and so forth. I'd like to call Larry and just give him a small token of our appreciation. Larry? My wife made this little drawing and a painting for you.
Thank you.
We want to make this presentation really on behalf of the entire congregation, and once again to express our deepest appreciation for all that you do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank her. She's one of me.
It's the tangerine I took home.
Very pretty. Thank you very much.
You are welcome. Before we proceed with the close of our service, I just want to welcome the people on Zoom. I know it's going to lengthen our service just a little bit to hear all the people who are on Zoom. We have a total of 35 people who are with us this evening. They include Cole and Ellie Appleman, Mel and Odette Sternberg, Elaine and Ron Berman, Nate and Iris Ginsberg, Shirley Boyd, Ann Zelniker, Howard and Patricia Silverman, Richard and Diane Frank, Amy and Jack Friedlander, Harold and Emily Fink, Jonathan Fratkin, Sharon Sockel, Harvey and Sandra Gandler, Robin Cardinali, Charmaine Mosier, Marion Birkin, Michelle, Martha Adams, Diana Kubat, Roy Hoffman, Stan Zimmerman, someone titled SMZQ, the Singh family, and Milton and Margaret Brown. So we want to welcome you here. We also have here about 12 people here, 12 people in the congregation. This is a wonderful gathering in memory and in inspiration and in celebration of the life of Reverend Dr. King. And once again, we want to thank James for his beautiful Devar Torah, really, and sharing his reflections. I really hope that this service will inspire us to begin to do the hard work that James referred to in terms of bringing unity, to doing tikkun olam, to do the very principles, the very foundations of Reform Judaism, to bring justice and equality and equal opportunity for all. Our service continues now with the Olenu and the V'nemar, page 586 and page 591. Please rise.
She
You may be seated. This week, we observe the yahrzeits of Milton Kozlov, William Slepian, Esther Friedman, Milton Goldberg, Eugene Onsteik, Norman Etheridge, and Amelia Pizer. Now turn to the congregation. Is there anyone observing a yahrzeit who they wish to remember at this time? Anyone on Zoom?
Ronnie Hoffman.
And of course, we're going to rise in addition as a memorial to, as a remembrance, a sacred remembrance of the life of the Reverend Dr. King. And before doing so, this was how he concluded the sermon that we've read excerpts from. I think it pertains really to all of us. Every now and then, I guess we all think realistically about that day when we will be victimized with what is life's final common denominator. That's something we call death. We all think about it. And every now and then I think about my own death, and I think about my own funeral. And I don't think of it in a morbid sense. Every now and then I ask myself, what is it that I would once said? And I leave the word to you this morning. I'd like somebody to mention that day when Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that I tried to be right on the war question. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness, and all of the other shallow things will not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind. I won't have the fine and luxurious things of life to leave behind. But I just want to leave a committed life behind, and that's all I wanted to say. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody he's traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a Christian ought, if I can bring salvation to a world once wrought, if I can spread the message as the taught, then my living will not be in vain. Let us rise now for the mourner's Kaddish, page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash me rabah, v'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevorach leolam ule'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemay de Kudsha Perichu, Ve'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, ta'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehesh lama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. You may be seated. We're going to conclude our service. We'll all rise and we'll conclude our service with the singing, We Shall Overcome.
Sing, in my journey of research, I just had to make this comment because I think it aligns so well with what we've been listening to the whole service. A few weeks before Dr. King was assassinated, he helped lead a interfaith service in Hollywood, California. And he took many of the same points of the sermon that you read. And in that sermon, he quoted the words from the hymn that we will be singing, We Shall Overcome. Also in his last sermon, I don't know if in your research, if you found, he spoke these same words, and it was how he kind of ended his last sermon was with the words of We Shall Overcome. So I thought it was very appropriate to sing. So please join in. If you don't, I think at home you may have the words in front of you. If you don't have them here, you'll catch on very quickly. So please stand and join in with us. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.